This is the place to be. Here in Paris, COP21 2015, this may be a historic moment, or it might be a huge flop. We're here to find out.
So Mark and I have been thinking, and we're coming to the belief that perhaps people are putting too much hope in what global leaders will be discussing and what will be the outcome of the COP21. Don't just hear our opinion for it though. We got to speak to a seasoned veteran, Vandana Shiva, who has been a part of many environmental summits and discussions in the past.
I'm here because this is my commitment to say it's the people who'll make the change.
I fully agree. I think at the end of the day, we can come to these kind of talks, and whether it be in Copenhagen in the past or whether it be here now in Paris, and we can wait for all of these world leaders to come here and make some negotiations and make that change happen. But I have to fully agree with you, and I'm sure Lawrence, representing Barefoot today, would agree that it's everyday people that are of the power to make those shifts.
Yeah.
I mean, sustainability is a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say about...
Well, everyday people and everyday actions.
Yes.
So how do you think all these global conversations and discussions will trickle down to the people?
No, I think it's the opposite. How will people's actions and a paradigm shift people have already made trickle up to world leaders who are 100 years behind time?
And so what would you hope that they would... What are some of the messages you would hope would trickle up? What are some of the messages you feel you would want somebody like Obama or Justin Trudeau or whoever, one of these world leaders, to actually come to in terms of an understanding? What are some of these messages that people aren't hearing?
As I mentioned, I've been part of the UN environmental treaty making process since the early parts of the drafting of the Rio summits. What I've realized over these many years is there's a convention on biological diversity, there's a convention on climate change, there's a third convention on desertification. And I've been asked by the UN to repeatedly address the connections between these three, because if we don't, then we will create false solutions within each of them. And frankly, the one that I hold most promise for is the Desertification Convention, because it's such a dismal situation that no cooperation is there. So that's where the truth comes out of how we are desertifying our soils, how out of that a refugee crisis is coming, how out of that conflicts are coming. As my recent writings have shown, and the Pact for the Earth that I am launching on the 5th out here, both Syria and Boko Haram are born of desertification. Yeah? And then the processes that destroy the soil then also emit the greenhouse gases and come back and create extended drought. So we have to start thinking systemically, and that's one thing I hope for. The second thing I hope for is a recognition that industrial agriculture is the single biggest cause for climate change. I wrote a book on this because agriculture was being hidden under land use, under other things. But we know 85% deforestation is for expansion of industrial monocultures, of palm oil, of soya, into the Amazon, into the Indonesian rainforest. We know food miles are increasing. We know synthetic fertilizers emit nitrogen oxide that is 300 times more destabilizing for the climate than carbon dioxide. We know factory farms are a major source of methane. We know wasting 50% of the food and throwing it into dumps adds to that methane emission. So we need to be talking about all greenhouse gases and all activities. And we definitely need to focus both on the damage industrial farming is doing, as well as the solutions that come with ecological agriculture. Because not only can ecological agriculture stop the emissions, it also is able to remove the stocks that are built up. It's the only activity. Solar plants can't, windmills can't. At best they can bring down emissions, but they can't pull out the stocks. Only living systems can. And that is what industry is shit scared of. That people with living systems can do better job. Now, agriculture is the only place where reducing emissions also gives you a better life. So no one can pretend to say, oh my God, my people will have to eat organic food. You know, no one can make it look like a sufferance.
Yeah.
It is an improvement in well-being. It's an improvement for the earth, the soil, the biodiversity, the pollinators, everything. So, but sadly, it's the missing piece still. It is still the missing piece. Of course, there's not a mention of it in the draft negotiations.
Of course.
But there is not even a mention of it in the bigger voices on climate change, which are focusing only on energy and fossil fuels, forgetting that the largest use of fossils is in fossil agriculture. That's what I started to call industrial farming. Absolutely. It's a fossil agriculture.
We know that this kind of hidden stuff actually comes out. I mean, we saw things like Edward Snowden, who released all these files. But one of the topics that was not talked about at all was in Copenhagen, the last climate talks. Both, you know, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK, and the US had all spied on Copenhagen to figure out what the kind of the baseline deal was going to be. And they knew that as long as we went to these talks and we came out with a deal, that everything was going to be okay. So they had spied previously and said, oh, all we need to do is say no, 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 no the entire time. And at the end, they're just going to bail all the countries out to make us look good at Copenhagen because they had that deal.
No, it was worse. They spied, they destroyed a legally binding agreement, which is what was being negotiated within the halls, was turned by Obama into a voluntary commitment. And I said this on TV the other day here in France, where everyone's saying, isn't that better? I said, when you do good things, it's better to be voluntary.
Yes.
But when you do bad things, there'd better be legally binding stuff. If you are a murderer and a thief or a rapist, you can't say, let him voluntarily give it up.
So it kind of comes as no surprise to me after studying so many freedom fighters, including Vandana Shiva, that in order to solve their problems, they always pointed the solution back to the people. Within each and every one of us, similar to a seed, lies the epitome of what will blossom into the world that we believe is possible in our hearts.
So now that we know that we need to be the heroes of our own destiny, we should figure out a little bit more about the villains.